midway through the NBA season, or roughly midway through the NBA season.
Oh, we're there. We're there.
We are
41 games played.
Oh, so we are there. Technically,
so
we're in there. Okay, so then it's time to have the conversation. Let's start with MVP. We've got usual suspects. You got Giannis. You got James Harden, LeBron. There's some dark horses. Luka's in the clubhouse right now.
Yeah.
Why don't you start? Like, we've had this discussion off air.
Constantly.
Yeah.
I mean, look, for me, I think the question that you have to ask first off always when you're talking about MVP is defining what the award actually is.
Yeah, I'm of the camp that it is the most outstanding player.
Right, and you're going to like this, I still value the word value in the
award. But it's never voted. It's
player.
Never voted like that. It's never voted purely on value.
Yeah,
Can we agree with that? Like,
yeah, and I think I would actually say that a few years back when Russ won with the 30-point triple-double season and they were a 6 seed, kind of changed it a little bit. Now, I don't think we're going to see teams outside of the top 3 or 4 in their conference, and even 1 or 2 now.
Right.
Like last year, I made the argument to you plenty of times last year that James Harden should have been the MVP, but the argument was made, most outstanding player on the team with the best record in the NBA, which was Giannis, and he got it. So I think a lot of these guys that might be in the conversation are out because I think things have changed in terms of what's actually valuable to your team as opposed to most outstanding player. Like, Russ probably was the most valuable player to his team that year.
But that was an anomaly, and those numbers were statistically like record breaking. So you could warrant breaking the norm to give him the MVP based on value. Mm-hmm. But traditionally, over the course of NBA giving out the award, it's given to the most outstanding player on one of the best teams, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And I think that year he was like maybe the second ever to get it outside of the top 4. So let's just start with our picks. Who do you have this year, midway through the year, obviously with the caveat that there's so much more basketball to play? Who are you picking at the moment?
Yeah, I'm going with Giannis. I'm going with the Greek Freak again. And I know there's some, people want to give it to a different player every year. The problem with me giving it to anyone other than Giannis is he's just gotten better from last year. He got it last year. Points are up. He's almost 30 a game. You're talking about the best defensive rating in the NBA at 96.5. And then he's got the best PER. And I know that you don't love that stat, but that is an offensive driven
it's more
analytic. And so if you're the best in both of those and your team is sitting there with only 6 losses leading the NBA, it's going to be hard for me to give it to anyone other than Giannis.
And look, and I think we also sort of both agree that this is not a conversation to say that this person is or this person isn't. It's just who you sort of value at this point.
Sure.
And I harp back a lot to what Russ said about a month ago about James Harden, which is that we sort of normalize his greatness. And so I still think that James Harden is the most valuable player in the NBA. He's averaging 30. His scoring's down a little bit from a couple weeks ago at 37.7 points per game.
Right.
Still averaging over 7 assists, 6 rebounds. The Rockets are still 26-12. They're right there in the top 4 in the West where they've always been. And I just think from a value standpoint, if you watch how they play and you look at their system and you look at what they're doing, I don't see any way this team is even a remote contender in that conference without James Harden.
Look, dude, we have this argument all the time, and I agree with that because of the way they play and the few amount of people that can play night in and night out and produce in that kind of system. His value is off the charts. It's the value. Yeah, value. We're back to value, right? But the question for me is, what comes first there, the chicken or the egg? Like, do you play like that because James Harden has to play like that, and then it marginalizes everyone else on your team? Or even if those guys can't do that, you've now built a team around him because you know that's how he's got to play, right? So therein lies the value, right? Like, he's created his own value because he ain't giving the ball to nobody else. Like, that's the conversation I have with that. I don't have the answer, but I often wonder that when I watch those teams. Like, if you gave that ball to someone else, could they be valuable in the Houston, franchise running a different system?
We have talked about that. And the more I watch James Harden, I don't know that there is anybody that can do what he does, even in that system. I think there's guys who could be close. I mean, I think, there are great, great scorers in this league. I mean, Luka obviously comes to mind just because of the way he's able to score and the way he plays and his size. He's kind of similar.
Kyrie,
even a
has
Kyrie,
that type
like
of,
Kyrie, even a Dame.
Right.
I wouldn't put Russ there anymore because his shooting percent. But the more I watch Harden, he has perfected reading his defenders and knowing exactly how to take every single type of defender off the dribble and score from anywhere on the floor.
I thought you were going to say he's perfected the art of taking every single shot.
He has.
Yeah, that's where I thought you were going with that.
I mean, he has perfected that too.
Yes.
No question. Now, we also we brought up defensive rating and PER. So I would also counter that with win shares, which is the amount of wins you add to your team. Harden is 1, Giannis is 2. Value over replacement, it has the word in it.
Yeah.
Value over replacement player, which basically means the value you bring to your team relative to a replacement level player. So, like, let's say you took Harden or Giannis off their team and put a G Leaguer.
Correct.
Or just an average NBA player. Harden is 1, Luka's 2, and Giannis is 3. And then box plus minus, which is just another takes everything into account type of stat. Luka's actually 1 this year. Giannis is 2 and Harden's 3. But in those value analytics age stats, Harden is considered the most valuable player statistically, in addition to leading the league in scoring and scoring at a pace that we haven't seen in, I don't know.
Yeah, no, he is a remarkable individual offensive player. I do want to qualify because I think a lot of it's individual, although he has a lot of assists. But and I think to some degree we're splitting hairs with him and Giannis and those guys. But if we're going to go purely based on value, then, you know, I don't know why you would have to even vote on that. You would just look at every analytical value stat and say, okay, well, here's your MVP because his value above replacement is that, and you know what I mean? Like, so I do want to give LeBron is an interesting conversation.
I was going to say we haven't really talked about it.
We haven't talked about LeBron. He leads the league in assists. He leads
assist percentage. This number, when I wrote it down, is absurd. 50% of the Lakers' field goals when he's on the floor are
remarkable.
Assisted by
That's
him.
Remarkable.
That's I mean, I don't know where that ranks,
right?
Like in an all-time or whatever. But that, for a guy like LeBron in his 15th, 16th year at his age, to just totally sort of not transform his game, but to take that level of his game to the next step.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. And you're talking about, like, he's second in triple doubles with 9 this year, and most people would assume LeBron was a walking triple double, but he historically doesn't have a lot of triple doubles, you know, because now you're talking about effort, you know, and with a guy with as much weight on his shoulders as LeBron, like, you can scraping after that last rebound here and there to try to chase that triple double. You know, you're talking about him having a historical year, and that's not to throw any shade at what AD does, but without LeBron and his playmaking ability and table setting mindset, that Laker team is not doing what they're doing now, right? You've seen the AD-led teams.
Right.
That team minus LeBron is not that much different than teams that he played on.
I feel like that team without LeBron this year would be horrible, which brings you to the value conversation.
Correct.
Who is the most valuable player? But my question would be, how much is this deck stacked against a guy like LeBron in the MVP conversation when he has a guy like AD? So a guy who's going to be top 2 or 3 in Defensive Player of the Year voting, who averages 25 a game and all that. Can he win it? Can you win it when you have another guy like that?
No, you're not gonna. He's not gonna win it. Like, to answer your question, he's not gonna win it. But I do think the conversation about what he's actually doing out there a little bit more in depth is one that we should at least have, because he's doing some LeBron things, but at a higher level than he's done them in the past. You know what I mean? Like, his ability to fuel the way that team plays offensively, you can't even quantify that. When you watch them play and you really sit there and take into account how many plays he's making for that team to generate offense, you don't see anyone else in the NBA do that. No one does that to the degree that he does it. Like, purely just, look, man, I'm going to take the offensive onus on my shoulders, and I'm going to get everybody, you know, involved in this game, control the flow and all of that.
Harden.
Yeah, but Harden does it for self.
He's also averaging 7.5 assists a game.
I know, but look, we're going to get into a deeper conversation about whether I like to watch that or not.
Right.
I'll give you, but again, like, LeBron is doing it for everyone. Like, I feel like it is a giving gesture.
He's decided.
LeBron does it.
He decided this year, I have this guy who's another generational talent. I have these other guys on my team that need to get involved.
And here's what I'm going to do.
Here's what I'm going to do.
Yes.
It's interesting. The one other guy that obviously Vegas sees as a favorite, or he's up there, he's even ahead of LeBron, is Luka.
Yeah.
And I think a month ago, you probably had an argument that he was the guy, the way they were playing. I just think he's sort of, their team has dropped off a little bit. They're now in the 6th seed in the West.
Yeah.
His numbers, and I think the same way we sort of talked about the marginalizing greatness with a guy like a Harden, it's already starting to happen with Luka. Like, it's a triple-double every night, and I think people just now are like, oh, Luka got a triple-double. It's not that big of a
deal. I think there is a little bit of Luka fatigue. Even that's not fair because he's really getting started. He's another guy, though, kind of like LeBron and James Harden. I'll put James Harden in that, where if he's not doing what he's doing, nothing exists on that team offensively. You're putting guys in a whole nother space. Casual fans don't understand that, like, certain NBA players can't exist on that floor unless there's a primary ball handler and a primary playmaker. And only then, when they've made that advantage and they've created that advantage for your offense, do they give you the ball, and now you can thrive in your role because you've had an advantage created for you by that primary guy. He does that. I mean, I don't know what percentages of the time he does that, but without him doing that, the rest of them cease to exist in those roles that they feel comfortable in.
I mean, look, the fun thing with Luka is just that at least we have him to compete with Giannis for the next 10 years for this award, because Harden's getting a little older, and eventually he's not going to be averaging 40 a game. LeBron knows how much longer he has, but it's just cool that Luka has emerged, because we had this conversation last year, which was this is Giannis's league for the next 10 years and no one's coming close.
Yeah.
It still might be his league, but at least Luka's looking like
Luka's in the conversation.
Give him a run.
What's going to be interesting for me is what is this, like, what is the ceiling on Luka versus the ceiling on Giannis? And I don't mean like from a physical standpoint. I mean, one has been a pro for a long time. Right, so you have to imagine that his learning curve was exponentially expedited, right? Like, he's going to be further along in his growth than someone who wasn't a pro for that long and wasn't groomed as a pro from the time he was 14. It's going to be hard to quantify that, but that's the question that I always ask myself. Like, how much room do either one of them have to continue to grow, like, as players?
Well, both of them, I mean, and this is it's a totally separate conversation, but both of them, it's probably their shooting. And because, you know, Luka he can shoot, but he's shooting 32% from 3 this year. So is Giannis. So I think it's in today's NBA, their ceiling is only limited by how they can stretch the floor for their team, because they obviously can do everything else. Yeah. So Giannis for you.
Yeah, definitely Giannis.
Is there anything Harden can do this year?
Win.
Just keep winning.
Win.
Where do they have to finish?
Win.
Where do they have to finish in the West? Because right now they're 4th. They're right there in the 2, 3, 4. That's like a half a game.
Yeah, you could put it, if you get to the 2nd seed for me, I'll give you that. All right. You get the 2nd seed, Beard, and you're my guy. And I don't mean to throw shade. I don't hate. I think he's remarkable.
Right.
But it's got to win. It's got to produce.
Win some games. Win some games, James. For me. Do it for me.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.